The wrestler. My friend almost died after trying to hit me with a diving elbow drop. So, get this. It is sometime in the school week, right? And it is almost exams. And so my bro comes over to help me study, right? No problem. We crash in my room, and you know what? We actually study, right? So there we are studying and doing Pythagoras and stuff. Then I get hungry, so we get the old lady to make us something to eat. As we are eating, I ask him to hand over the juice, but he starts messing around. So I spear him to the floor. He tried to fight and push me off, and so we started a little match. It ended after we fell. It's been a while since I'd wrestled, you know. Last time I did it was when I was around 8 years old with my cousin and his friend. But get this, he has never wrestled his entire life. No way. I can't believe it. But he's serious. So I tell him, we are done studying. We are about to have your first wrestling match. Started out fine. I hit him with a few moves like the FU and choke slam. And when it was his turn, he wanted to try something. So he got up on top of the wardrobe, and by now I got a bit nervous. My bro really never has played wrestling, and I could tell cause I have this ability to see when someone isn't used to moving properly. I noticed the way he breaks and stiffs up and stuff. So yeah, he was doing that. But I thought I should let him get on the wardrobe and jump off, since it won't be that hard. And it was a bad idea, man. He got to the top and yelled out the commentator's voice, then tried to jump to elbow drop. But the wardrobe broke under him, and he ended up falling sideways. He broke the window, and he fell outside. I ran over, and looking outside, there he was. Bro, he was covered in blood. Something stabbed him in his side. Now I know I'm in deep shit because my old lady told me to stop wrestling, and if she saw this, even worse, I could hear her coming to my room. So I made him hide, and I closed the curtains. And when she came in and asked what was happening, I told her that I broke a glass on the floor, and I asked her to get the broom. And while she left to do that, I looked out and my bro was bleeding, man. I had to take him to the hospital. We were hurrying down the streets as fast as we could, and my bro started getting slower and slower. He started telling me stuff, like he will miss me and he's dying. Scared me to my core, man. And just when he was beginning to get really heavy, I made it to the hospital. I stayed there till he was patched up, and I have never wrestled since. The repairer. My coworker fell in love with me, then tried to kill our client. I never thought I'd tell this one, because it's a bit messy. Excuse me if I jump around a bit as I tell it. Anyway, I repaired people's houses, people's household furniture, working on windows and doors and stuff like that. At that time, my partner quit to be a housewife, so I got a new partner. He was a bit strange, to say the least. His eyes were always glazed over, and he often smiled too much, even if I hadn't said anything in particular funny. Anything particularly funny. Even worse, as the days went on, I found out that he had something of a crush on me. I assumed it would go away, since it was mostly because I was the only one who spoke to him, and that's what I told him. But he was really good at his job, and I was glad for that. Then one day, we had to fix a window at this college kid's house. When we got there, I didn't speak to him much at first. I thought he'd be one of the type who are really rude, but I couldn't have been more wrong. He smiled and laughed with us, bringing us snacks and refreshments as we worked through the window. It was great. Then as we drove home, the guy, let's call him Mark. Why that boy gave me his number. By the way, he didn't. And Mark started talking about how he saw the way I was looking at him, that he was beautiful, and finally, he asked me how I felt about the boy. I told him the truth. He was a great client, and that's all, nothing more. And it seemed like he understood for a moment. But it was just for a moment. When we got back to the boss, Mark told him that I was sleeping around with the clients. This was starting to get annoying, but luckily for me, my boss believed me over him. But then, get this, at night, as I was sleeping, I got a call. It was from Mark. He sounded extremely drunk, talking about how I was prostituting myself to people and stuff like that. What that boy had that he didn't, though he called him less endearing names than boy. Just as I was explaining, I heard it, a gunshot. I asked what was that, and he told me that if he couldn't have me, then neither could she. He was going to make that boy's heart feel as painful as his did. And he dropped his phone. I didn't go back to sleep. Instead, I grabbed my clothes and I got to the car and drove to the boy's house immediately. I waited outside to see when Mark would appear, but unfortunately, I fell asleep. When I woke up in the morning though, Mark wasn't there. I didn't know if he had gone there or not, so I tried to call him many times over, but he wouldn't answer. Finally, at around midday, I got a message from Mark. It was a picture, captioned, "You are a garden tool," and it was a picture of my car outside the apartment complex. The passenger. I was driven home by a murderer who thought I witnessed his act. This happened last year. The snow was starting to fall, so I go to a fairly proper school where nothing big happens, which means when something big does happen, everybody hears about it, and it will be on everybody's mind for months, even years. How far something like murder would go. No doubt, by the time it got to me, it was twisted and turned to new shapes, but it went something like this. There was an after-school football practice. The boys practiced and there was fighting, but then that was quit. They continued practicing and finished their practice. After that, they went to the lockers and people left. The boy who was murdered was almost a senior. He left last. As he was walking out, he was stopped by his murderer. They had a squabble and there was a gun pulled out, and then he was murdered. The other boys couldn't see because they were on the other side of the wall, but there was somebody inside the building on the top window who could have been high enough to see the fight and eventually the murder. Anyway, that's the official report, and throughout the whole school, police were walking around looking for this supposed witness, and it was so scary. While one would expect it would be easy to find the witness, since there should have been a few boys at practice, it actually turned out to be harder than that. Firstly, it wasn't just the boys at practice. Some of the girls came to watch their boyfriends, and they brought their friends with. Secondly, it wasn't only the children from our school there. Some children from other schools also came to watch the practice. So the number just kept growing, and it was harder to know what happened. Anyway, this is all I knew about the story at the end of the week after that. I was about to walk home one afternoon when it started snowing, and that's when a car pulled up in front of me. The guy inside was a redhead, and he asked me if I wanted to drive home. Now, although he didn't introduce himself, I knew exactly who he was. Every girl at school knows him. He was a prefect, tallest guy in our school, and a captain or something like that in the football team. For a second, I didn't know what to say, and I looked around, but no, he was talking to me. I said no thank you, because I didn't doubt that I'd make a fool out of myself in front of him. But he opened the door and said I should go in, so I went in. He started talking about the horrible weather, and out of nowhere, he just called my name, Cindy. I had no idea how he found out my name. He said he'd been watching me for a while now, and that I interested him, because I was cute. My home was close, but he missed the turn, and I didn't tell him, because I wanted to see what he had learned about me. But then he apologized for missing my turn, and said he wanted to quickly pass by a friend's house first, and I didn't mind at all. When we got to his friend's house, he went inside, giving me time to search on Google how to talk to boys. Just then, he returned with lots of plastic bags, and we left. The conversation was much better then, and finally, he started asking me if I liked football. That's what reminded me of what happened. And I remember that he was there too on that day. He asked me why I was there that night. Not if, but why. That's when it hit me. He thought I was also there that night. He thought I was the witness. And by now, we weren't driving home. We were driving to some forest. I told him I hadn't been there that day, and he laughed, saying my friends told him I was there. That day, he asked if did I have a boyfriend there or something, and I said no, I didn't have a boyfriend. And he asked, someone as pretty as me? I told him I didn't, and I was busy trying to figure out how to convince him. But he believed me. He turned the car and drove back to my home. He dropped me off and drove off. I've seen him a few times at school. We catch each other's eye, but say nothing at all. I still don't know why he let me go.